action. I can't get no call to action, but I try and I try and I try.
Hello and welcome to Call to Action, the go-to podcast for anyone trying to make sense of the world of marketing, business and beyond. In an industry that is a minefield of utter bollocks, we aim to capture our heroes and allies from the front line to have a chinwag with. It's like Pokemon Go, with the single but vital exception that it's not a short-term bandwagon of shite. It's brought to you by Gasp and I'm Giles Edwards. Today I've caught Adam Ross, Creative Strategy Lead for Coca-Cola across the ASEAN and South Pacific region. Adam is responsible for translating and elevating global core creative ideas regionally and locally, wrangling agencies around the world and driving thought leadership across the business. No longer buying or selling ideas as he did agency side, he now, in footballing terms, plays the trequartista number 10 role by linking play together to create and score. Adam comes from a household where they must have had their Weetabix. In a call to action, sibling first, his sister is none other than good friend and best-in-class copywriter Vicky Ross, who we nabbed for a chinwag way back when on episode 6. On the topic of better briefing, Adam says we should think of our brief as the first execution of the campaign and the creative team as the target audience. Well said. I love that. And welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, 7 quickfires. Surf or swim?
Swim.
Specialist or generalist?
Generalist.
Right, favourite Dave, trot or die?
Trot.
Arriving quietly or leaving loudly?
Ooh. Depends where it is. I'm going to go arrive quietly.
Okay, Cantona or Ronaldo?
Cantona, not even a thought.
No, I knew we wouldn't get you on that one. Right, we've got a Coca-Cola one. Holidays are coming or Hilltop?
Hilltop.
Nice. And lastly, Creative Sparks or Copy Safari?
That's a good one. I'm going to go Copy Safari for sure.
You wimp. Amazing.
One day,
listen,
yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be cool. That would be really cool. So listen, Adam, thanks for joining us. To start the show, can you tell our audience about your first ever job and then what you regard to be your first proper job?
Yeah, for sure. So, first ever job, I had a few waiter jobs. I wasn't very good at them. I worked for Costco for quite a while, collecting trolleys and stacking shelves and walking around and eating stuff and putting the broken products in for this isn't for sale bit anymore is how I spent an evening for quite a while. My first proper job was straight out of uni. I did a marketing degree and got a marketing job. I say this is a proper job. But that marketing job was it was a company that produced those like office supply catalogs, like an Argos catalog, but just for office supplies. And my job was to write the tiny little descriptions for every single product. And it was like thousands of pages of shelves and chairs and stuff like that. I lasted about 2 weeks as it was boring. And I think about 11 o'clock one day, I just got up and left. I just walked out and drove home. I couldn't take it. And my first real job was at MediaCom in London. I didn't know what a media agency was, which is quite telling that I did a marketing degree and didn't for that, or maybe I wasn't listening, but I didn't really know what a media agency was. I did, but it was just in that time just applying for anything and everything. I was lucky enough to get an interview for an entry-level planner role. I managed to get the job, and I was there for 5 years, I think, before moving to Sydney. And it was amazing. I got to learn under Chris Binns, who was my boss at the time, and he's now MediaCom's Global Chief Strategy Officer. I absolutely adore him. And I got to work on the most interesting briefs I've probably ever worked on. And it was at the most formative stage of my career where I was learning my craft of comms planning, comms strategy, if you like. And I set up to those briefs. My first client was the Metropolitan Police. And so the first briefs I was ever working on for years were how to stop teens carrying knives, and how to reduce inner city black on black gun crime for Operation Trident. I used to have weekly whips at Scotland Yard. Like, it was mental. But that was sort of where my grounding under some incredibly smart strategists and planners at MediaCom with those kind of briefs and those kind of challenges.
Wow.
And that whole experience completely shaped how I think and how I approach things, and how I've always approached things from then, really.
I want to ask you a bit more about the work with the Metropolitan Police. But before I do, I understand the degree you did was retail marketing specific. Is that right? And if so, what led you to even considering to take that? Because I'm always fascinated by how people find marketing, because it seems to be something that most people, and we're, 140 plus episodes in, most people aren't really aware of marketing until at least their 20s.
I'm probably going to carry on with that trend, because I didn't want to go. It was an accident. I didn't want to go to uni. I think I'd had enough of sort of school and teachers and stuff. And my parents convinced me to go and regret going and come back, rather than don't go and regret it and not be able to do anything about it.
Okay.
So I went and I thought, okay, if I'm going to go and learn something that I don't know anything about. And I don't know anything about computers. So I'm going to go and do an IT degree. And I went to my very first lecture, and it was full of a lecture hall of like 200 guys. Again, not how I envisaged my university experience. And I sat down, and they just gave me a piece of paper with X's and zeros on it. I went, yeah, just program that in. I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. So that was my one and only IT degree lecture. And then a few weeks after that, I thought, well, if I want to carry on living in Manchester, which is where I went to uni, I need another degree. Went to the university dean. He said, there's a spot on marketing. And I was like, cool, I'll try that. And I'm going to sound really stupid here, but it was a BA in retail marketing, but the marketing course was split in two: retail marketing and marketing management, and they shortened it to BAM or BAM. And because I was in Manchester, I just thought that was an accent thing. I thought people were describing the same thing, but either with a northern accent calling it BAM or a southern accent calling it BAM.
That's amazing.
Until I saw it written down, I was like, oh, hang on, I'm doing retail marketing. Okay, fine. So yeah, I maybe like any other guest with another healthy dose of stupidity. I didn't know what I was doing, or I kind of fell into it, but just really enjoyed the sort of human psychology of it all, and found it really interesting, luckily.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, I think luck plays a huge role in people's careers, and we don't really acknowledge it enough. But certainly in those kind of formative education years, that I think that it's sadly a lot comes down to that serendipity, which isn't particularly helpful when you talk to people who are anxious about what to do, but then equally is hopefully at least a little bit liberating. In a sense. Yeah, then you mentioned, to be honest, there's loads of people listening who probably still don't know what media agencies do, so I don't think there's any shame in not understanding perhaps the mechanics of MediaCom. But did it start to become very real, what you had learned in your marketing degree, when you were tasked with working with the Met Police? Like, is that when you actually saw the reality of what it is you could do?
No. Sadly not. No. I've often thought, actually, I'd love to go back to some of the textbooks and stuff and just see how relatable it was. Yeah. I think the thing that sticks with me so much is, and it's a conversation that I think exists all the time, is how little we focus on the other 3 Ps of marketing.
Yeah.
So I think it gave me that sort of holistic grounding, but then because I went into an agency as my first job, I very quickly went into just one of the 4 Ps. And so I've probably got the grounding and the context, but then just specialized in the area where we only really spend 12% of the entire marketing time and energy.
Yeah. And what did the work look like that actually came out of that experience with the Met Police? Like, how did you tackle that problem?
I mean, we talk now around attention deficit and people going out of their way to avoid advertising and all of that kind of stuff. But when the client is the Met Police and your target audience are criminals and your messages don't beat, ultimately, it just takes it up a level. And so what it taught me was the power of an idea, the fact that media is simply the gap between your brand and your target audience, and whatever goes in that gap can be anything. You shouldn't just think of, a lot of things, TV or print or radio or whatever. But I think it taught me about the power of an idea to capture attention and make an impact and get noticed. If none of that happens, then nothing happens. So I think with all of those things played to an extreme, that's what gave me the grounding. So in terms of what the work looked like, we went a lot into collaborations. And making ads that didn't look like ads ultimately. So for knife crime, we made a video game called Knife City, which was like a GTA before GTA was invented. But the moment you stab someone, it morphed into a real life video. So it was like really hard hitting. So you pull people there, and we launched it like a video game. We didn't put the Met Police anywhere near it. Similarly with gun crime, we partnered with a grime artist called Roll Deep, and got them to write a song about the perils of gun crime, like an authentic song, and it went on their album. They toured it, and we launched it like we would a song. So it was a real song. We created a music video with director what was his name, Jack Nava, I think. Very, very cool director. And again, it was a really heavy hitting music video, and it was in the time before streaming and anything like that. So you'd start hearing the track in clubs and on the radio, and it was when MTV was about music videos. And so the music video came a few weeks later when we'd already built the interest. This new song by Roll Deep. And then they saw this video. Again, it was a really heavy hitting video about the consequences. And it was only revealed that it was the police right at the end. And we won a Cannes Lion for that. And I was like, oh, right. So you just do work and then you win Cannes Lion. Okay, that's how this thing works. But yeah, it was a mad grounding. So just talk me through that.
I don't know if your time working with them overlapped with I think it was our second guest ever on Call to Action, a wonderful guy called Stephen Colgan, who regularly now pops up at Ogilvy's Nudge Stocks conferences. He's an author of several books, but at the time the time it's relevant, he was head of the problem solving unit at the Met Police.
Right.
He then went on to be head elf of BBC's QI TV show. He's a fascinating guy. But one of the things we spoke about was something he introduced during his time at the Met Police, which was to curb both noise pollution and violence in and around nightclubs in the city. So, trivial by comparison to the problems you were tackling. But he's the guy who introduced giving out lollipops outside nightclubs, because it's both hard to be noisy when you've got a lollipop in your mouth, and it's also not very intimidating when someone's got a lollipop in their mouth. And it was amazing that how effective it was. But a point I remember him vividly talking about, just in general with the Met Police, when you're dealing with like deterrence or deterring criminals, it's really hard to measure, because you're trying to measure something that hasn't happened. There isn't like a numerical number. Was it difficult to measure the effectiveness of the work you did? I mean, clearly it was effective, I don't doubt that. But was it difficult to get those measures?
I can't remember how we did it on the knife crime one. On the Operation Trident, the gun crime one, we tied it in with a gun amnesty, and so we measured the sort of year-on-year increase in sort of guns handed back, which is a crazy stat to just thinking about it. To put it in a Cannes video, being like, how many guns were handed back this year versus last year? I think that standard media metrics of sort of reach and views and clicks and shares and all that kind of stuff. But no, I remember on Trident, it was tied to a gum amnesty.
And then at what stage did you decide to move client side, or was that, serendipity at play as well?
It wasn't. No, it wasn't really. I moved 6 years ago, so I've been at Coke for 6 years, coming up to 6 years next month actually. And I'd been at agencies for almost 20 years, I think, or just under, about 18 years. But I was at so after MediaCom, I moved to Sydney. I went to Mindshare in Sydney, and I was there for about 10 years. And then I moved to a creative agency, again in Sydney, and I wasn't enjoying that at all. It wasn't working, and I thought, I think at the time wrongly, I was thinking, oh shit, I can't make 2 wrong moves in a row. That's bad. Having been at a place for so long, I think I just had my son as well, so it was all, you get all a bit emotional, don't you, about, yeah, exactly. And so I thought long and hard. I treated myself as a brief, ultimately, in a strategy, in a project of going, well, what? I hadn't really thought about going to the creative agency because they approached me, and I kind of just went, oh, new, shiny, interesting, yeah, let's do it. And I hadn't really thought about whether that's what I wanted to do. So then, because in my mind I got that decision wrong, I thought, well, I've got to get the next decision right. So I thought about it really hard. And one of the things that came to me, I can picture it. I was just in a cafe, and I was just like mind mapping myself, if you know what I mean, as the start of a brief. And one of the things that I wrote down without really thinking about it was like, I hate it when a brief arrives. I was like, oh shit, what? And I just noticed that everyone around me at the creative agency, when a new brief came, they're all sort of young and excited. And it's like, yes, amazing, we get to work on this. And I went, God, we're going to have the same conversation. And, we're going to be approaching the same thing. We're going to have, another sort of back and forth with the client. I was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that I felt like that. That's bad. And if I'm not excited anymore when a brief arrives, then that means I can't work in an agency. What do I do? And I'm not a marketer. I'm not a traditional marketer. So I can't go and be a brand manager or anything like that. And so I started doing some research, and I saw a lot of agency talent being brought in-house, particularly in the States, and strategic talent to sort of blend brand strategy with creative strategy. And I thought, well, if that's happening in America, it will probably happen in Australia in about 5 years. So maybe I should start thinking about how I set myself up for that. Anyway, cut a long story short, this is where the serendipity moment comes in. I had a dinner with some old Mindshare colleagues, and I got sat next to one of them. Serendipitous moment, I was sat next to him. And he went, oh, how you doing? And I'd had a really bad day at work. Again, serendipitous moment. I was like, oh, shit, hate my job, looking for something else. He's like, what are you looking to do? And because I'd thought about it so hard, I just articulated very clearly exactly what I wanted to do. And he called me up the next day. He said, you just described a job we've been trying to hire for at Coke for a long time. And we've got a few people down to the final interview, which is next week. But do you want to come and just jump into that final round? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I went and presented and managed to get the job. So it was very deliberate in terms of I knew what I wanted to do, but it was very serendipitous in terms of the timing of that conversation.
Yeah. And actually, I'm a big fan of people, or believer that people need to have bad experiences in order to find the good ones. I think you kind of define what the next right move is by, via discovering what the next wrong move is, right? It kind of helps define that. And then you mentioned earlier about the kind of gap between the time at university, which was focused probably too heavily on one of the P's, and then having exposure to the other 3 in your first role at MediaCom. Is that something that was even more evident when you went client side? Did you have more exposure to that?
Yeah,
I respect you said you're not a full marketing person, or maybe not fully
absolutely
see yourself that way, but it still tends to be more visible, doesn't it, when you're client side?
Yeah, the thing that really struck me was agency side. You're always told the thing that we spend 100% of our time on, the clients probably spend about 10% of their time on. And my observation was, I think that's actually a massive overestimate. And the first few weeks, days at Coke, I'd be sitting in meetings and I'd have no idea what people were talking about. They were talking about pricing, formats, customers, bottlers, factory lines, and all of these things that I'd never considered, really. Like, you'd sort of, heard about it, and that's what happens. But this was, every single day was that. And, obviously the brand being right upstream in the formulation of the brand plans for the year or 3 or 5 years ahead, and all of those types of things. And just there were just so many more elements that impact the idea, the impact, the advertising, if you like, in that sense, and how many stakeholders there are, and how each one has their own different priorities as to what they need. It was incredibly illuminating.
Yeah, it's something that has come up a few times in the past, and I feel like in the position I'm in, it's not necessarily like for like, because we are a marketing agency, less so a advertising and comms focused agency. But I have found it really interesting. The more people I speak to, client side marketers, the more they hammer home that point you just made, that even saying it's 10% of their time is spent thinking about comms, or even their agency relationship being hugely inflated. I've heard that time and time again. Is that something that when you talk to agencies now, you try to communicate that? Because I feel like lots of agencies don't really appreciate that when they've finished a presentation, say, to a client, that the client isn't only thinking about that the next day or the day after that. Like, they've got so much else going on, and as you say, so many stakeholders, different agendas, perhaps all sorts of egos to navigate. Like, it's just a very complex side, right?
It really is. And no, I don't necessarily talk to them about it, but maybe I should. But I think I play in that gap between the two, so I try and fill that gap, if you like. To make it less apparent. And I've only ever worked at Coke as a client. I haven't had any other client experience, and we have a lot of in-house ex-agency talent whose role it is to work with agencies and develop the integrated marketing campaigns and the communications and the advertising. And it always blows me away. I go, well, I know how many of us are here, and I know how busy we all are. I can't imagine what it would be like at another client where it's all sat on the brand director or the brand manager. I have no idea how they would do that. It blows my mind. But then, sorry, to your question, I don't think the agency necessarily does know fully what happens, once they walk out the door and over the next few days and weeks. But I guess it's my job to keep communicating with both sides, so maybe they don't necessarily feel that gap as much.
Yeah. I was going to ask you've just kind of nudged me into it, actually, from your previous point. I've got a line here from the research that obviously we do on all of our guests, and you talk about playing in the middle. And in fact, we nodded to it with the number 10 reference on your intro. Do you feel like you're firmly in the middle, or do you feel like you're a client who's stepped into the middle of that Venn diagram to kind of orchestrate things? Like, I suppose it's a tricky question, and maybe it's an unfair question given you, by your own admission, you've only got that one client-side experience. But I wonder how that feels for you. Do you feel like you're on both sides and you're just trying to unite?
Probably not. I think I actually feel like I'm an agency spy that's found myself in a client organization. And I
love that.
I always refer to the client as the client still, even though I'm the client. But when I talk about, our category teams or our brand teams or anyone else that isn't me, I refer to them as the client. And I catch myself doing it, which is weird. I'm 6 years in. So I find that strange. I think I've certainly, throughout my time at Coke, more than one occasion, I've had people say, remember you work for Coke, not for the agency. And I think I have a very healthy dose of empathy for the agency side, in terms of knowing what goes on there, knowing the impact of crunch timelines or changing briefs or feedback that could change over time. And I think once you work in an agency and you've done it yourself, you know what it's like to be on the end of those types of things. And so I try to help our brand teams give everything that we can to set the agency up for success. Because if we do that, then we do a great job, and if they do a great job, then we'll win. And then at the same time, I try and translate what's happening our side back to the agency, so they have a better understanding, and I'm just left in the dark and be like, oh well, we presented 2 days, we've had nothing, like what's going on? So I try and play that. People have described me as the agency whisperer in terms of how did you manage to get the agency to deliver that when we would bang our head against the wall. And I think again it just comes from that level of empathy of being able to understand the pressures on each side. And trying to link them together in a way that works for everyone.
Well, I also, just to echo exactly what you said, I don't think any of that, I think what you've said just reinforces that brilliant quote we used in your intro of thinking of your brief as the first execution of the campaign and the creative team as the target audience, like that ruthless focus and empathy. Just sings loudly. It's fun. It's funny actually. I love the intros that Beth writes for our guests. They're often very witty and they're fun and they're memorable. And we often debate which quote to use for our guests on that last line, because there's always, in this case was no different. There's always wonderful lines that have come up in past interviews. But as soon as I saw that, I was just thinking both of how refreshing that is to read coming from a client side, but also with respect to you playing in the middle, it does scream that you have empathy and you understand what the agency needs. Is it easy to actually instill that within your own teams internally? Like, have you had to do some work in I guess kind of showing people how important a brief is? Because the better briefs work, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that I know Mark Ridson was involved in, kind of suggests that briefing is definitely an area that needs more attention.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a set and forget of this is what a great brief looks like and now do it. I think it's a case of an action that you have to take every day. And I guess people, I try and model it, obviously, and I try and make sure that when I see a brief before it goes to the agency, I'm making sure that I feel it's strong and clear and single-minded enough to go over, and I can often be an annoying one internally of going, no, this isn't clear enough, and there's too much marketing jargon in here, and your audience is, ultimately a creative who isn't thinking about Coke every single day, and this is gonna land on their desk, or even creative department. You want this brief to be the one that they put the brief that they're meant to be working on down because they want to work on this one because it's so exciting. So I think unless you've worked at an agency, you can't feel those dynamics at play of going, well, this is turning up on someone's desk, this is going into a building, this is getting pinned up on a wall. Like it has to stand out amongst everything else, just like the ultimate work that they create off of it will do. And then obviously in meetings, try and model how to give sort of effective feedback, being direct, and not. I always used to hate it when I was at an agency and you just had a meeting, you get back to the agency and it went really, really well. And you get an email the next day and it's like, that was awful. That wasn't how the room went. So
you hacked my inbox, Adam.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I try to avoid those situations. I did a lot of work when I first started. Do you know what? When I first started, I got it wrong, completely wrong at Coke, because I went in really nervous, to be honest. I was like, this is Coca-Cola. Like, who am I to go in and tell anyone what to think at Coke? This is nuts. I think also since I went in at the time I was the creative lead for Australia, New Zealand, and South Pacific, and I felt a lot of pressure, and I turned that pressure into, well, I need to take control of every single output that goes out. I need to take control of it, and I ended up clashing with a lot of people. Probably again bringing my agency side of all that matters is the work, but I didn't have that appreciation of the need for alignment in relationships and how things work in a massive corporation. And so I think I created unintentionally a lot of conflict because I was trying to control everything. And then it was actually a conversation I had with Brent Smart. He was very generous to have like a sort of, mentoring, coaching type conversation. And he just reminded me about what agency people do around inspiring great work, not controlling it. And that's when I was like, yeah, of course. And so I just changed my approach from going, well, I can't control every decision that's made around me. But what I can do is control how much I excite and inspire and influence people around me. And hopefully I can then influence future decisions. So I shifted the way I worked, and that's apart from anything else, my mental health it's done a world of good. And just got back to the part of what we do that we enjoy. This is exciting, and people should feel excited and inspired about the work that we can create together.
Yeah, and is that noticeable not just for you and your own mental health, but your team? Like, it's because I know you share a lot, both I'm sure internally, but also externally via your monthly Creative Sparks deck. It's about enjoying and pointing out and recognizing great creativity, and I'm sure again from the research we can see that the principles of marketing science is something that you're very passionate about.
Yeah.
I assume you share that internally too, and that's less about you, isn't it? It's more about, I suppose, the wider team.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the wider team, and it is ultimately about the work and the relationship between client and agency. And I wanted to try and create a universal and shared language, if nothing else, because I think that's a big part of it, is that we could be talking about the same thing but using a different language ultimately. And when I started, I remember in my first week there was a girl in my team, and I was just overhearing a conversation between her and a lady in the brand team, and they were looking at two out-of-home billboards, and they were having a very strong discussion as to which one they liked the best, and they each liked a different one, and it was just descended into a weird argument. I was like, okay, that can't happen. So then I just, again, going back to that point of just how little time, resource, energy is dedicated to advertising, that there was a gap to be filled in kind of sharing the sort of history of advertising, or what makes great advertising, and making it actionable through frameworks or series of questions or briefing templates or feedback templates. And it wasn't necessarily my opinion, but distilling what's known to be true from people far, far smarter than me. Whether that's, you mentioned Dave Trott with Benet Field, Karen Nelson, Byron Sharp, obviously, like just Bill Burback, the greats of our time is, and I think Byron Sharp talks about it. It's like we don't have to reinvent gravity every time. And so it allowed me to create a framework to move subjective opinions into objective conversations. And then if you start adding in regular inspiration of work that is, talking to similar audiences or trying to solve similar problems, it again helps you talk to the agency, rather than being, I just want something really creative. You can go, I want I want something like the perimeter signage that dispenses balls, because that communicates speed through a passion point. It just gives you something to anchor a conversation on.
Yeah, and you're right. And all those people you mentioned, like there's empirical work out there which shows you that it's not just an argument around subjectivity. I'm sure this comes from a really, really old Dave Trott blog, but for at least a decade now, when we present creative work to clients at GAS, we always have it's like a mind reset slide, and it's just a picture of a parachute. And I swear I've got clients that we've worked with for years that have probably seen it 100 times and are sick to death of it. But we do it every time anyway. And we just just allows us to reframe what they're about to see and how we want them to critique and feedback on the work. And we just say, look, like a parachute, I don't need you to like what we're going to show you. It just needs to work or not work. Nobody likes parachutes. And it's a really, there's there's probably a better way of doing it, and it's a bit clumsy at times, but it's just a way of kind of, exactly to your point, trying to make the conversation as objective as possible, which is really hard to do, especially when you're working in an industry that's full of cutting edge technology and great visual designers and copywriters and wordsmiths. And it's like, it's really natural to like things, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's important to take that objective stance. So yeah, well done, mate. That sounds brilliant.
Might steal your parachute, Metal. That's great.
Do it. There's not enough parachutes being presented. I did have someone reply once. I think it was Phil Bailey at Halo, because I shared this on LinkedIn a few years ago, and he said, "I like the parachute that works." And I was like, "Fuck off."
Yeah. It is very introduced it. Anytime I said I liked something, I had so many people pull me up on it, rightly so. And I was like, "No, that's great.
Yeah,
it means it's working."
Time, weather, and... Today's podcast is sponsored by No One. Whether you need research, brand, or strategy, No One brings you absolutely nothing. With simple templates and drag and drop tools, you can have a great looking nothing in minutes. If you have a real marketing challenge you'd like to chat about though, just email giles@gasp.agency and use the offer code GILES to get 10% off nothing. Brought to you by No One. Time, weather, and...
You mentioned how much better you felt post having that session with Brent Smart, and you mentioned your mental health and how you felt better, just I suppose in yourself and everything else that kind of surrounds that. I asked you in the Quickfires, arriving quietly or leaving loudly. Leaving loudly is a lovely thing that comes up a few times in the research. Can you explain what you mean by leaving loudly and why it's important, especially for people in a leadership position?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a phrase I stole from the ex-CEO of Kimberly-Clark Australia, Robert Wright-Reck. I've probably got his name horrifically wrong there. I'm really sorry. But he mentioned it. It was a phrase that stuck with me. It was basically, and he said it pre-COVID, and COVID changed a lot of things, obviously. But it was the point that come 5 o'clock, a lot of people just sort of sneak out and just hope their boss doesn't see them and just, off I go. He's like, no, don't do that. Leave loudly. Go, I am going now to, pick up my kids, or do what I want to do, whatever it is, because that, when leaders do that, it gives permission to other people to do that. And so, importantly, it's not just about picking up kids or doing the school run. That's something, for parents, that's obviously what they're, they choose to do. That's what I'm passionate about. But it could be, if you're a really passionate surfer and there's a great swell tomorrow morning, you can be like, I'm going to come in at 10 because I'm going to fuel myself with a great surf in the morning. Yeah, great. We're all people that need other things to fuel us. But with me, it's a case of wanting to be a great parent and a great husband, and that means I leave loudly to pick my kids up from school 3 times a week. On average, me and my wife split it. Again, different to daycare, is something I learned in the last year. School, you got to pick up at 3:10. And I'm in a regional role, so right now that's 12:10 for most of the people that I work with. So I'm saying to people from about midday, I'm not around for a couple of hours unless it's absolutely urgent. And I block out my diary so people can't get in there. And I don't block it out with private appointment. I block it out with picking Finley up from school, so everyone knows what I'm doing. And everyone knows that I'm going to be back online later and knows that I'll get back to them and all that type of stuff. But I've been very, very consistently vocal about what I truly value in my life and the priority that I place on that. And there are a lot of meetings that I'll decline. So I'm like, no, that's over the top of my kids' dinner or bath time or bedtime, and I'm not going to be able to do that forever. And there was a phrase that I saw not so long ago, which was, the only people that will remember you working late in 10 or 20 years' time will be your kids. That's really stayed with me. So I go out of my way to make sure that everyone knows that's what comes first, and I'll work around it without letting anyone down professionally, because I'll work when they've gone to bed. So yeah, I think that's what I mean around leaving loudly, is just being very vocal about what you need and not apologizing for it. And I was actually invited last year to speak at the Coke Regional Conference about it, which is, a great sign from Coke as well, that they wanted me to talk about it again, because by me doing it and talk about it, it gives permission for others to do it. As I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and just thank me for saying that, 'cause they didn't know it was possible. And again, if you're thinking like the region I'm working in and the sort of gender stereotypes for a lot of guys in Asian markets, it's they might want to do this, but it's sort of just the unsaid. Me leaving loudly, it hopefully just gives permission for others to feel they can do the same. That was a bit of a long rant, really, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, it was good. It was really good. And it's nice to know that it's something that Coca-Cola wants to amplify and set that precedent as well. So I think it's wonderful. I think I've just realised we're 40 minutes in. I should probably go to listener questions, Adam.
Okay, cool.
So asking the general public for their opinion, be it on Brexit or boat names, is notoriously fraught with danger. We're going to try and get 3 in at least. I'm going to start with Paul Andrews. Now, this question assumes you've listened to the uncensored CMO interview with our good mate John Evans with Scott Galloway.
Oh, yeah.
He says, is Scott Galloway right? Is brand dead?
No. Is I sure? No, let's up against Scott.
Question 2.
No, absolutely not. I think, Liquid Death. That was a podcast. He was the founder of Liquid Death. Was on John Evans recently, and
yes, he was. Yeah,
he talked about water being the most ubiquitous product there is, and so you can only win or lose on brand. And his Liquid Death winning. I think Prime Energy drink is another one. People weren't paying for what was in the bottle. I think, in fact, I was listening to that podcast, and Scott Galloway described when he was talking about it, was saying that brand is to go as a mediocre. The days of a mediocre product being wrapped in brand codes to create irrational returns is over. And I'd say that Prime Energy drink is a mediocre product that was wrapped in brand codes that created an irrational return. Even in the podcast, John Evans asks Scott Galloway how he turned his own brand into a business. So I think he's kind of weird. I get what he's saying, but yeah, just go to a supermarket in a foreign country and trying to work out what you should buy. Like, there's so much power in brand.
Yeah. I think part of me, I think Scott knows what he's doing, right? I think it's, we're both big football fans, you and I, and the immediate metaphor I could think of or reference point was Adrian Durham on TalkSport, who says some batshit crazy things because he knows he'll get the phone lines ringing.
Yeah.
So I don't believe he truly believes that, but I think there might have been maybe a subtler point within it. And your examples of Liquid Death and Prime are great examples.
And also with football, the Premier League, it's branded as the best league in the world, but is it?
Certainly the most commercial.
I'm very upset at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we can have some football therapy after we've recorded. I'm a Spurs fan. It's not the last few weeks have been painful, but there we go. Question 2 is from James, and I'm wary that we've kind of alluded to it on the leaving loudly point. But James asks, how do you balance being a parent in a leadership position at work?
I think it's hard. I think it's, as I said, I'm very clear on what my values and priorities are. I'm very vocal about it, and it is hard in the fact that I have the flexibility that I need from Coke, and I'm very grateful for that. That my team know that I'm not around for a little bit in their afternoon, but then in return I work pretty much every evening when my kids have gone to bed. That whole thing, I don't want them to see me working late. I don't want them to miss out on me because I'm working late, which means I just work later, so I don't do it in front of them. If you know what I mean. So flexibility is a great thing because it means I can work pretty much whenever I want. It's also a very dangerous thing because it means you can very quickly fall into never not working. So I don't think there's an easy answer. It's hard. It's whatever works for you really. But
is it? I don't want to ask if there's any colleagues, given you work across, many time zones, no doubt, because of the region that you cover, is it more normal in, say, Australian culture and society to have that flexibility versus others? Like, has it been received? Is it easier for certain cultures to receive your stance on balancing leadership and being a parent than it is on others? Because it must get a whole mix across Asia, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had anything other than a very positive reaction from anyone and everyone. Absolutely. I think the difference in Australia compared to the rest of Asia is sort of paid help and live-in help is very common in other countries. And so the thought of it's just me and my wife with 2 kids trying to juggle that and 2 full-time jobs. So I think culturally there are differences in how you manage family life and professional life. But it doesn't mean that my life is necessarily harder than someone who has a live-in helper. It's just different. So I think everyone's different, and I think I don't think there is an easy answer. I just think you have to find a way to make it work for yourself in the best way that you can. I was at a talk about mental health, actually, where they were talking about when you become a parent, you just have to get comfortable with the fact that you're probably only ever going to be able to do something 70% well, because you're doing so many things at the same time. If you want to concentrate on all those things, you're going to be letting people down all the time. So I guess you've got to be comfortable with that and try and focus on where and who you absolutely can't let down in whatever the situation may be.
Yeah, that's a really good mindset. Question 3. So we've probably asked at least 2 questions per episode, so we must have had at least 300 listener questions, and I think this has gone in as my favourite question we've ever had. You'll soon see why. So Vicky asks, why did you think it was okay? Why did you think it was okay for your action man to drive my Barbie's Ferrari?
Because he didn't have his own Ferrari, and why did he not think it was okay not to share? Just, yeah.
Amazing. Question back to Vicky there. Listen, to be honest, there is another one for Vicky, but I'm going to read it out, but I'm equally wary it's turning into a smear campaign. She says, do you think you realised the power of your leadership skills when you briefed me to run with a jacket covering my eyes straight into a brick wall, and I did it? She then says, obviously I should have questioned the brief, but I was young and inexperienced.
Well, she didn't give the freely, so that was payback for many years of her throwing me down the stairs. Most of my childhood photos, I have at least one black eye from the radiator at the bottom of the stairs, and I saw my opportunity and I took it.
Nice.
In terms of results,
have you?
No, so yeah.
Have you two ever worked together?
No. We've sort of said one. Not really seriously, but we've said, yeah, that would be quite fun. I'm not sure how much we'd get done, but it would be fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I really enjoyed those questions. Let's go to the final part of the interview then, Adam. Our 4 pertinent posers, starting with, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I'm probably going to say something quite boring. I think I'm at the age where everything hurts, so probably look after your body a bit better. Would be good. Something other equally boring is invest money now, because you'll appreciate it left. I didn't listen then, and I wouldn't listen to me now. I'm boring myself, to be honest. Maybe I don't know. Just don't worry. I don't. No one really knows what they're doing either. So yeah. I think just be comfortable in the discomfort.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of dilemmas. Is it dilemma? What do you call it? A paradox, I suppose, where you only realise that later in life how kind of almost insignificant worrying can be, and I don't know whether it can ever truly rectify itself or not. But no, that's all good advice. If you could banish one thing from the industry, what would it be and why?
People on power trips, because it's just irritating. What we do just should be really fun. Yeah. I think, and it's another Dave Trott quote, isn't it? If we could remember how trivial advertising is, we could remember it's our job to make it fun. So I think anyone that sucks the fun out of it should be banned.
Yeah, and they get everywhere, right? I've always, I've talked to people in the past who think that it's more prominent in certain industries, or, again, you could say client agency side, but I think it's just law of averages, isn't it? Like, people get everywhere, dickheads get everywhere. You get a decent, healthy amount of this bit.
That's how I change it. If I manage one thing from the industry or the world, it should be dickheads.
Yeah. Number 3, are there any books that you would recommend to our listeners?
I read Emotion by Design by Greg Hoffman recently about his time at Nike, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I saw a recommendation from Zoe Scammon called Misfits by Michaela Cowell, which I read. It's a short book, read it in the morning, it was brilliant. Jerry Seinfeld's Is This Anything is great, just from a pure comedy point of view. He's basically every joke he's ever written in chronological order. But
oh wow,
I love the title of Is This Anything? It's just so true to what we do as well. I'm going to put it out there. Is it something? And it's just the power of human observation at its core. It is brilliant. All of Dave Trott's books are great. And then I recently read a couple of the School of the Alain de Botton. It makes me sound very fancy, doesn't it? Alain de Botton's books. The Course of Love was very good, and the Pleasures and Sorrows of Work was insightful and very entertaining.
Well, I don't think those last two have come up. Course of Love rings a bell, but no, I think that's new. Dave, I think quite rightly comes up regularly, and so it should. Is This Anything? I've not heard of that. I might buy that. I'm a big stand-up comedy fan, and that sounds right up my street.
Oh, that's great.
Emotion by Design and Misfits, brilliant. We'll link to all of those. And then number 4 was we always dedicate every episode to someone, and we bestow or hospital pass that honour to our guest, who has to give their reason why. So would you kindly dedicate this episode?
I should say Vicky, really. She certainly put us in, with a Ferrari comment. But she obviously put us in touch with each other. So she made this happen. She's the biggest supporter in my life, definitely. But she doesn't fit in the unknown criteria, does she? She's got quite a following. I mentioned Chris Spins. I'd go with my old boss at Mindshare, Katie Riggs-Smith. She was my boss for about 10 years. She was the CEO of Mindshare. She always believed in me, supported me, coached me in work and life. She was the first person I told that I was going to propose to my wife, because I didn't know what to do with the whole ring thing. I was like, do I go and buy a really expensive ring and Rishi doesn't like it? Do I ask her to? What? But then how does that work? Because then she'll know. I was so confused. And then when we fell pregnant with our first, again, she was the first person I told. So right, what do we do now? Who do I speak to? So she's always supportive in every area of my life and guiding me through it. And she's an incredibly inspiring woman. So yeah, Katie Riggs-Smith, please.
Amazing. Well, this is dedicated to Katie Riggs-Smith, with big nods to both Chris Spins and Vicky. What was Katie's advice then for the ring buying, if there's anyone out there wondering the same?
Honestly, it was wonderful. She just gave me a card. She's like a mafia boss. She gave me a card. She's like, call this guy. He's a ring designer in Sydney. So go and buy $100 ring from a crappy jewellery shop. Just go and buy that, propose with that, but then go, we've got a date night on Wednesday where you're going to go and choose your own diamond and your own ring with this guy. And that's what we did. And it was, just wow, perfect advice. It was amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. That's why you keep calling her back.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this isn't my life. What should I do now?
Amazing. What a great dedication. So everyone can head over to this listing. We're going to share everything we've discussed. We'll share links to Creative Sparks. I'm going to throw some links to a recent Copy Safari because I'm a huge fan of that as well. I appreciate that's a bit of a sibling crossover. I'm sure you don't have any issues with that.
Absolutely.
Where else can our listeners get more Adam Ross?
Just on LinkedIn, really. I'm on Twitter, but I'm more of a lurker than a contributor. So yeah, I am on Twitter, but yeah, I guess LinkedIn, really. I'm speaking at Cannes and Cairns next month.
Oh, nice.
Which will be pretty cool. But yeah, I guess LinkedIn.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll include a link to your LinkedIn there, just in case there's lots of Adam Rosses about. I'm not sure I haven't done that search, but we'll include a link there. Adam, I've really enjoyed this. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for finding the time, not least given the the time zone tennis we've been playing.
No, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, it's been a very enjoyable chat. I'm very appreciative that you asked me to come on. So thank you.
Great. And finally, thanks to everyone listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, please do share and review the podcast. Keep your questions and guest requests coming in. To get in touch, it's easy to find Gasp online or email the mouthful, that is call to action at gasp.agency.
I can't get no call to action. I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try, and I try.